Welcome to Day by Day True Crime Stories, the podcast where we explore a different crime or justice milestone from this day in history. I'm your host, Kona Gallagher, and today is March 9th. I've got to warn you up front, today's episode is one of the most complex and disturbing cases that we've covered so far. It involves murder, cannibalism, and consent, three things that should never belong in the same sentence together. On March 9th, 2001, Armin Meiwes, a German man, carried out a crime so shocking that it made headlines across the world. But what set this case apart from other horrific killings was that his victim, Bernd Brandes, was a willing participant. This case is a doozy, and it forces us to ask unsettling questions. Can someone truly consent to their own murder? Where do we draw the line between personal freedom and the law? And how does a person's darkest fantasy become a real-life nightmare? Today, we're going to explore the psychology, the legal battles, and the lasting impact of this infamous case. Let's get started. Born on December 1st, 1961 in Essen, Germany, Armin Meiwes grew up in a household filled with loneliness. His parents divorced when he was 12, and his two older half-brothers moved away, leaving him alone with his controlling mother. Without siblings or friends, Meiwes spent his childhood creating imaginary companions, ones that he could never lose. But as he grew older, his isolation took a darker turn. Meiwes developed fantasies about becoming one with somebody by consuming them. He later described it as a desire for ultimate closeness, a way to never be alone again. These fantasies, which were rooted in his childhood loneliness, persisted into adulthood and only intensified over time. By 2001, the internet had become a place where people with unusual desires could find one another. Meiwes turned to a forum called the Cannibal Cafe, which, as the name would indicate, was dedicated to fantasies of human consumption. There, he posted an ad that read, quote, "Looking for a well-built 18 to 30-year-old to be slaughtered and then consumed," end quote. Several people responded out of curiosity, but when it came time to follow through, they backed out. That is, until he met Bernd Brandes. Bernd Brandes was a 43-year-old engineer from Berlin. By all accounts, Brandes was successful, intelligent, and well-respected in his field. But beneath his professional exterior, he harbored his own dark fantasies. The desire not to be eaten, but to be castrated. Brandes, however, was fearful that such an act would lead him to being involuntarily committed to a psychiatric hospital. So in order to avoid this, he agreed to allow Meiwes to kill him and consume him afterwards. After Brandes answered the ad, the two began an intense online communication during which they discussed every detail of what was going to happen. In Brandes' mind, there was no coercion. This was his choice, and he was committed to seeing it through. On March 9th, 2001, he traveled to Meiwes' home in Rottenburg, Germany, a decision that would end his life. Everything that happened that night was meticulously recorded by Meiwes on videotape, providing evidence that would later shock investigators. As the night began, in order to reduce his pain, Brandes drank alcohol and took sleeping pills. As their evening of horror began, Meiwes attempted to bite off Brandes' penis, but failed, so he eventually used a knife. The two then tried to cook and eat the severed organ, but that attempt was unsuccessful. It was either too raw or too burnt. In the end, the remains were fed to Meiwes' dog. Bleeding profusely, Brandes grew weaker. Meiwes ran him a bath where he lay for hours, slipping in and out of consciousness. As the night wore on, Meiwes began to have second thoughts, even praying for guidance. After hours of hesitation, Meiwes eventually ended Brandes' life by stabbing him in the throat. He then hung the body on a meat hook and carefully dismembered and stored the remains in his freezer. Over the next 10 months, Meiwes slowly consumed nearly 20 kilograms, which is almost 44 pounds, of Brandes's flesh. For nearly a year, Meiwes lived his new reality until he made the crucial mistake. He went back online. When he posted another ad looking for a new volunteer, an alarmed student in Austria contacted German authorities. On December 10, 2002, police raided Meiwes' home. What they found was horrifying. They found body parts in the freezer, labeled and stored beneath pizza boxes. They found thousands of files detailing his fantasies, writings, and plans, and they also located the videotape that documented the entire crime. Meiwes was arrested on the spot. The court case presented an unprecedented legal challenge. Could you be guilty of murder if the victim willingly consented? Was this assisted suicide in a way? Or was it something far more sinister? During the first trial in 2004, Meiwes was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to only 8 years and 6 months. But the prosecutors appealed, arguing that this wasn't just mutual consent. Meiwes killed for sexual gratification. In 2006, a retrial was ordered. This time, the court agreed that Meiwes had acted out of deep psychological and sexual compulsions, and the killing was premeditated and deliberate. On May 10, 2006, he was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. Meiwes is currently serving a life sentence in Kassel prison in Germany. In a bizarre twist, he now claims to be remorseful and has even become a vegetarian behind bars. Despite this, he remains one of the most infamous cannibals in modern history. The case of Armin Meiwes and Bernd Brandes is one of the most disturbing in criminal history. While most of us cannot comprehend the actions of either man, this case forced legal systems and society to confront the darkest of human desires. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Day by Day True Crime Stories. If you found this story compelling, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And be sure to join me again tomorrow as we explore another significant event in true crime history. Until then, stay safe and remember that behind every headline is a life worth remembering. Day by Day, True Crime Stories is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!